Okay, so welcome to our presentation on assessments in AP Insight, where we're going to be focusing on what it looks like when we're assigning quizzes, analyzing the data that comes out of those quizzes, and then determining next steps. We just did those pre-meeting polls. So just to give you guys a heads up, this is not the first in our series. We do have another webinar that's available. It's already pre-recorded. It's available on the AP Insight platform under, excuse me while I adjust my screen here, under the strategy section. And when you click on that, you can go to the place where it says with the PLC webinar series, and so you can connect to that. It'll show you like where the recordings are. So that's pretty easy to get to. So we've done one already it was back in November, I believe, and so you can look at some of those like starter points if you want to go back. It's also about an hour, so pretty manageable there to get you started on some of those things. So we talk about like performance tasks and quiz, some real like basic setup stuff. All right, so what we're going to try to look at tonight in the time that we have left, I'm going to do a quick overview of formative assessments in AP Insight. We're going to look at a couple of examples from what is likely an upcoming challenge area for a lot of you guys on optimization. And then we're going to have Andy walk us through some points about challenge area assessments, and I'll talk to you guys about who's joining us tonight, Andy and Margarita. And then we'll wrap up with some closing discussion with whatever time that we have left. Excuse me. I really apologize because I've been fighting a cold, but it's January, so who hasn't, right? So we're joined tonight by two of our AP Insight Calculus consultants. What that means is that they are AP Insight teachers, so they are AP Calculus teachers whose schools are in positions such as you guys where they have purchased the AP Insight platform for their students, and they themselves are using the materials with their students. But in addition to being AP Insight Calculus teachers, they're also consultants for the College Board, which means that they're well-versed in presenting on these materials and assisting other teachers with using them. And so they have a lot of like on-the-ground real-time strategies for how to use these things, and they've really dived in deeply with them. So that's Andy and Margarita. Do you guys want to say hello real quick?
Hello.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. So that's Andy. You'll be hearing from them quite a bit in another section of our presentation. And since it's on here, a little note that Margarita is also our discussion board moderator. I'm going to show you what that looks like on a later slide, but that just means that on the AP Insight platform, there's a discussion board that you can engage with other AP Insight teachers and ask questions and get more information, post resources. And so Margarita serves as our moderator and helps to like facilitate some of those discussions, and she checks the board for questions and so on. So you guys have sort of like an ongoing resource there. And finally, I'm Tiffany. I'm the director of AP Instructional Design for Mathematics at the College Board, and I helped with the committee that designed the resources and put together professional trainings for it. So let's get started. So I said we'd talk a little bit about formative assessments in AP Insight. So that just means like us looking at what AP Insight is to begin with, because it's really a strong formative assessment tool. It's a combination of instructional resources and assessments for learning. So what that means is that it's designed to provide focused support on challenge areas that are foundational to college level achievement, yet hard to teach and hard to learn. And it uses formative assessments to identify students' misunderstandings during the instructional cycle so that targeted resources can be provided to help close those gaps. So a couple of points about that. One is that by focusing on challenge areas, that means that we are not, AP Insight is not comprehensive of all of the topics in AP Calculus, right? It is only focused on challenging areas, those that were selected by our committee as being foundational to college level achievement, but still difficult for teachers to teach or difficult for students to learn. And so the resources really like dive deeply into those specific topic areas. And in terms of assessments, these formative assessments, we're talking about things that are like the idea is that it's different from summative assessments, right? Anything that's happening like during the instructional cycle, even the end of unit exams that are in AP Insight, even the challenge area assessments, those are all considered formative because they're not an end of course, like tell me what you know type of assessment. It's a tell me where you are right now so I can still provide meaningful intervention and feedback type of assessment. So it's meant to like target those gaps in student learning before they get to the AP exam, right? The AP exam is sort of like your ultimate like king of assessments. It's at the very end. Excuse me. There's nothing else the students can do at that point, right? They're just showing what they know, and that's all they know, right? At that point, and there's nothing to be done about it once they turn in their exam. But everything else up to that point during your instructional cycle of the school year means that like there's a way to still sort of like capture those misunderstandings and do something about it. And so that's where AP Insight comes in. All of the assessments are designed to be formative. They provide you with information about what the student might have a misunderstanding about at that point, and it also provides resources for you to do something about it at that stage. So you'll see a lot in the platform that uses this like sort of 4-stage model about excuse me, about prepare, teach, assess, and act. And so those are the 4 stages that like everything is built around. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that tonight. What we're going to focus on are the assessment parts, where we're primarily looking at building block quizzes, and then later Andy will walk us through a little bit about the challenge area assessments. So just so you have a sense of like what some of the resources are that are made available in each of those stages, this is just sort of like a bullet list. When I say resources, I mean basically like the type of thing you could like print out, the type of thing you could like look at on your own later or pull up as a PDF on the platform. So that sort of gives you a sense of what's there. And like I said, we're focusing on these 2 tonight, the assessment part, and then a little bit about the ACT at the end, the assessment reports. Okay, so let's say that you're teaching optimization, right? And you're like, I want to give a quiz. I want to see how my students are doing. So what does that mean? Like, what's a building block quiz? Here are some key points about it. It's basically a 5 multiple choice question quiz. It's designed to take about 10 or 15 minutes for your students to complete. Some teachers give this as like an in-class assignment. Some teachers give it as a take-home. It's completely up to you, right? All this is really flexible. We're just trying to give you some like logistical information about it. But excuse me, but the key is to assign it after students have been taught the content for that, right? I mean, I know this sounds like a no-brainer. It's like, well, of course, like why would you assign a quiz if you haven't taught it, right? But because this isn't like your quiz, for instance, like you know when you make a quiz, right? Oh, I've taught this, so I can ask about it. I've taught this, so I can ask. But in this case, like if it's not a quiz you've designed, if it's something you're sort of like pulling up and like, or like assigning through the online tool, then it may not be something you're as familiar with. Like you may not have had a chance to like look at all the questions yet, and so it is going to be really key here to like assign it at a point where you know you've covered like everything that's going to be on that quiz. So just sort of being familiar with what's there is going to be really important. These, just so you know, could be completed online or you can print them out and then enter the students' responses manually. And so those are both options. But just so you know, the online version, like if students go through and like click through the one that was assigned to them, they would get immediate feedback on those questions. And you would also get the data in your version of the portal. The questions are designed to mirror and scaffold to the AP exam in that they are multiple choice, just like the multiple choice section of the AP exam. There are calculator and non-calculator section type of questions geared towards calculator, non-calculator, and they scaffold to the AP exam in that they ask about like basically like one thing at a time. They're not going to look like the culminating type of item that students will eventually see, because that's not the goal of these items, right? The goal of these items is to sort of assess where they are at that point in the year, without sort of getting a bunch of other conflating information in there. We just want to know, do they know this one thing? And if they don't know this one thing, how can we intervene? How can we fix it before they're asked about that and a bunch of other things on the AP exam, right? So then how do you get to the quizzes? Let's say, okay, this sounds great. I want to give my 5-question quiz. Let's say you're interested in this challenge area of optimization, and maybe you're on the building block where they're finding critical points, right? So you're going to pull up your main page here on AP Insight. You're going to go to the Assess tab and select your challenge area. So that's pretty intuitive so far, right? So if we're doing optimization, then that's the guy we're going to click on. And it's going to pull up for you. There it is, optimization is the one that's on the next screen it takes you to. And then you're selecting the building block within that. And so there's a drop-down menu. We said we're on building block B, the critical points. And so we're just selecting that one. And then it gives you the option for you to view and assign that building block quiz. So we're going to go ahead and act like we're selecting that. And just as a heads up, if you're like, I don't know, I may need more detailed information on this later, that's great, that's no problem. There are actually helpful links available on that screen for how to assign assessments and then how to score assessments. And so those are two separate things. I can also provide a link for each of those down here in the link section before you guys leave this evening, so that you can easily browse to those and then just save them. They're just PDFs, and so you can save them to your browser if you want. Okay, so also as a heads up, again, for the recording, the sake of the recording, you can always email apinsight@collegeboard.org. That is a dedicated email address that goes to our AP Insight team, and they will respond or connect you with a person who can respond to your inquiry about anything. We have a question in the chat box. Did I say there was a cost to AP Insight? I did. It is one of our fee-based products, so it is something that school districts pay for, usually at the district level. So it's usually something that has been managed already by your district administrator or sometimes your school administrator, that then gives teachers access through essentially a subscription service for the number of students that are in your class and or district. And they bundle things differently depending on different volumes of students, right? There's different discounts at different levels. And also depending on if districts have participated with other AP Insight courses, because we also have AP Insight available for biology, chemistry, and a couple of the history courses. So there are bundling discounts for those types of things. If you have questions about what it would cost for your district, although I sort of assume that you guys were already participating since you got the emails about it, but if you or a neighboring district or a colleague or a friend are interested in it, all you have to do is email this guy right here on the screen. For assistance, email apinsight@collegeboard.org. So I'll post these links about how-to guides in the later section. So let's fast forward a little bit and act like, okay, our students have done this quiz now, right? And they've either done it online, so their answers are available here, or I've gone in and entered their answers, so then it generates this view here. So all I've done is gone to the assessments section of AP Insight, and I've clicked on results, and now I'm looking at the view that shows me what's called student performance. What I like about this is that it shows the 5 questions that were on there, the topics for each one go across the columns here, and then the students are listed vertically in that first column. So a couple of things here. I would want to be thinking to myself when I'm looking at this, what does this view tell me? If I'm looking at this and this is my students' data on the topic of optimization, Like, what are some things that jump out to me right away, right? This is what I would want to be thinking when I'm looking at this. Because the idea is, like, how do I use this information to, like, do something about it, right? Like, if I see, green is good and red is bad, it means they missed the question, right? Then what are my takeaways just at a glance here? Well, one thing I notice is that these three guys right here are not passing, did not pass that quiz. Because if they missed 3 or more out of 5 questions, right, then they didn't, it's considered in the red here for AP Insight. So those 3 guys are sort of on my radar now, right? And then the next thing that jumps out to me is this one question has some interesting features about it, right? Because I can see the green, the correct answer was B, but a lot of students, in fact, at least all the ones in the first few rows here, a lot of students got it wrong, and not just got it wrong sort of like flailing around, like randomly guessing, but they all got it wrong by picking the same wrong answer. And that's enlightening to me, right, as the teacher, because I'm like, wow, like, not only did they miss it because they all had the same incorrect reasoning about something. So I'd be really curious to see, like, what was it about answer choice A that seemed appealing to them, and how can I intervene or provide sort of like a follow-up that helps correct for whatever that misunderstanding was. So that's what we're going to look at next. Like, what is AP? How does AP Insight help me when I see that these are sort of my red flags? So here, a couple of things, like in terms of next steps, here's what I would do, right? If I'm looking at the matrix view here, there's a little button at the in the corner that says Print All Reports. So I would select that. And here's what it brings up. It's essentially a PDF that shows all of my students, like in sequence, basically, I believe alphabetically. So you can take a look and see, like, for each student how they did. So it shows you in that report. There's a check mark next to the correct answer, but what it's showing you also is like what that student picked on that question. So here's that one that we were looking at, like the ones who all thought it was A. Like, here's one student who thought it was A. And below that, it tells you like what A is really about, right? It's like when a student picks A, the student doesn't understand that an absolute max can occur. I'm sorry, an absolute max occurs where P prime changes sign from positive to negative. So the student identified like something else because they didn't understand this one thing. And at the bottom there's sort of a summary basically of what the basis of that misunderstanding is. So that's all pretty helpful, right? It's like, oh, okay, so all the kids who picked A, like here's where they were hovering around, and they didn't pick B, the right answer, because that was their gap. Okay, great. So what do I do about that? Like, now that I know like sort of where they were struggling, well, on the same sheet, on that same page where the question is a section called Recommended Next Steps. Excuse me. And it gives either in a lot of cases it gives a video link that the student can go to. Sometimes it just gives a description of like hey, by the way, like, this is what an absolute max means, and this is what you should have been looking for. Sometimes it's just a real quick like reminder to the student, like, here's your next step, like read this or look up this definition or something really basic. And then it gives a couple of follow-up steps that they can try for practice to sort of like close that gap, so to speak. So if I'm the teacher then, and I'm like, okay, I've got a class of kids, some of them are like failing on their own, like have just like are missing a lot of things, and other kids are sort of just missing that one for the same reason. So some of the next steps I might be considering in my head are, like, I could take this report that was generated, just print out that one set from my class, and then distribute those reports to those individuals, to all the students, right? Because there's one for every student in that PDF that's generated. So I could print those out, distribute them, and assign them for homework, and say, like, okay, guys, like on those 5 sheets that you just got, because there's one for every question, look at the ones that you missed, go home tonight and do what those next steps say to do, because that's going to help you with the thing that you missed, and then we'll come back tomorrow and like talk about it. So that's one thing I could do. Another thing I could do is I could look at that question where all the kids picked A, and I could reteach that one concept to address the particular misunderstanding for the whole group, basically, and then incorporate like live practice time into my next lesson, basically, so that students sort of spiral back to that one topic, and I get a chance to see how they're doing after my reteaching, basically. So those are just a couple of ways that like I could take like what's in AP Insight and like use it in my instruction as like a follow-up or give students selected practice. I could show that video in my classroom, right? I could show that, next step, and maybe I'm not even the one who needs to do the reteaching, right? If there's already a YouTube link there, pull that up, as long as your school filters allow for it. I know sometimes that's a struggle. So there are lots of ways that you could go about it, but here we just want to help make you aware of the resource existing, right? And some ideas of what you could do with it to target where your students are. So let's take a look then at what we just looked at, which is, we just looked at the building block quizzes, and I'm going to hand it over to Andy, who's going to walk us through just a couple of pointers, reminders about challenge area assessments, which are essentially our free response versions of these formative assessments. Excuse me. And then he and Marguerite are going to sort of engage in some discussion with you guys. Again, feel free to add things to the chat box. In the meantime, I'm also going to add a few other web links down here so you guys can easily access some things. So take it away, Andy.
Hi, my name is Andy Schroeder. I've been teaching calculus for a number of years. I think it's 12 years for calculus and 27 teaching total. And as far as teaching calculus, there's never been a resource like this, which I'm very glad to be able to use it. And some of you have used it, I can see that. But Marguerite has also began using it, and between the two of us, maybe we can help answer some of your questions about how best to use it. Like some of the conversations earlier, just keeps thinking about how I was using the building blocks as Tiffany was talking. And it's the tool catches me and the students in misunderstandings all the time. So the tool is very useful. It's a matter of digging into it a little at a time and get comfortable with it. Walking through the bullets, explaining the features here for what a challenge area assessment is. Again, the challenge area assessment is covering all the building blocks, the whole challenge area. It contains 2 or 3 free response questions. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes, similar to an FRQ on the AP. It confirms students' abilities to make connections among the building blocks. It assigns students have been taught the content relevant to the challenge area, not so much like the FRQ. It incorporates many different ideas. This one just focuses on the one objective, which is, in this case, we're looking at optimization. They usually complete this on paper. My students will be doing the optimization one here shortly, and they'll be completing it on paper. I may not manually enter the scores myself yet. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with that, but I can. It allows me to get that visual. The questions mirror and scaffold AP test. They're out of 9 points. They have same time frame to take it, but still remember these are formative assessments, and that the goal is not to assess the students here. It's the goal for them to see what part of the building blocks they don't understand, this particular challenge area of optimization, and what they don't get without all the distractions. So what is it that makes these challenge areas building blocks to the AP? Well, it's obviously building to these AP tests. More specifically, free response questions like the one shown here. Here we have part A of the free response question number 5 from the 2014 AB exam. Note that this question really pulls together a lot of things from the course, like all the FRQs do, with particular focus, though, on the optimization. In this case, it's just a relative max and min question. These are our end goals. Helping students demonstrate these masteries, these concepts, when there are a lot of things to tie together. If you're just constantly looking at these FRQs like this one or the next one, which I'll show you here, which is the 2015 AB response question number 5. There's a lot of ideas and they draw from many different places. And if you look at each FRQ, the kids get distracted on what the focus is here, optimization. And that's where this AP Insight part comes into play and really helps. So one thing to keep in mind before you assign a challenge area assessment is each challenge area comes with its own overall instructional resource, similar to those available for those on the building blocks. These resources help students to tie things together for all the building block concepts. So when you mentioned prepare, teach, and each one of those components, I actually, and I'm sure Margarita does too, we'll open up the prepare portion of this challenge area and read through all the misconceptions that students have. And it kind of helps me, even though I've taught it a while, it helps me to focus in on what I should be expecting in the misconceptions. It also has the progress sheets.
Hey, Andy. We're just getting some chat notes that it looks like it's a little difficult to hear in some cases, so you might want to either maybe adjust your volume, like adjust your microphone volume, and also for participants, if you guys are still having a hard time, you might try adjusting the volume on your headphones, and then somewhere maybe we can find a balance.
Is that better?
Yeah, we can try that. Yeah, just try to speak clearly into the mic, and I think that will help.
I apologize.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Thank you. Yeah.
As I was saying, before I give them the challenge area assessment, I like to have them. I like to at least walk through the prepare part and the challenge guide sheets, and then the teaching components, which are the student progress sheets, and there's also application sheets in there for kids to look at first. And then there's the performance tasks. One of the best ways to do this is to use the challenge area performance task. It covers the same topics and skills that will be on the assessment, and it's a chance to recap everything and evaluate student performances before they give them the actual assessment. I looked over this one, particularly for the optimization one, setting up the problems. It's pretty much helping them recognize the different shapes of volumes, knowing their formulas for volume of a cube, of a cylinder, of various different shapes that they'll see. Obviously, the rectangle, and the different ways they'll see the rectangle, and those tools actually helped. I snipped the pieces here and there and helped the students use. So I did use it, but modified it to my needs for my students. There's the performance text I just mentioned. There's the building blocks A, B, and C. I did the one that helped students to struggle the most on, which was to prepare for setups, to set up the optimization questions. Not sure which one that one was in particular from A, B, or C, but when they did that one, for me, I was very taken aback when I noticed that a number of students missed a particular question, and I realized that part of my instruction had gone too far and they were misreading the question. They weren't setting up the question or actually solving the problem and not able to figure out which answer to choose. So despite the fact I've taught it 11 years, these questions and the students doing them allows us to see pieces that they're missing and the misconceptions. So those were the building blocks, and it's very similar with these challenge areas. The challenge areas, each challenge area is accompanied by a set of scoring guidelines to help you guide you as you're grading the students' work. Here's an example of one of the student problems in challenge area assessment optimization. These guidelines outline the criteria the students must meet in order to earn 9 points. I allow my students to actually grade them themselves. They grade them in groups.
Yeah, I actually let them do the same thing. I give them to my students and I kind of put them in pairs. And I think it's a great way for the students to just kind of view what they're getting scored on. And it just kind of builds that practice so that it can prep them for the AP exam. So they're kind of having that kind of thinking where they know what they're getting scored on and they know what specific things they need to include in their justifications. I think that's something that my students like. They really found that really helpful. They were kind of giving themselves their own feedback. So that matrix view of the analyzing the results part in these challenge area assessments, it's really useful so that you guys can also group your students and then have them maybe score themselves and maybe bring out some discussion from their small groups.
Yeah, and if you get a chance to take a look at it, I mean the screen's kind of small, but if you look at the questions, this particular part you're looking at is the first part. It's strictly the looking at critical points, maxes and mins. We've looked at various and sundry types of questions, and we're going back to this and taking a look at this question. We haven't done it yet. We're actually doing it tomorrow. I have confidence my students are going to be will build some confidence to these things before I show them those FRQs that we commonly would just show kids with all the mixed ideas coming in at once. And this is very specific. The second part to it, and now I'm sorry, here's the grading component to it. The second part to this assessment, actually, I don't know if we're going to show it or not, but that one's one of the rectangles under a curve question. It's very specific. It doesn't add extra components to it, so it's very nice. So moving on to the actual grading of it, and when students look at scoring these things, here's an example of one of the problems that challenge area assessment on optimization. And here's an excerpt from the scoring piece. So if you look at the top there, that's what the scoring component looks like. And my students will get in groups and they'll discuss the points and kind of evaluate each other and discuss. And then we get into questions of what should I get? Should I give them the full point or not? I don't get it too much into the detail here. Maybe later when I do an actual FRQ, we'll discuss the details. But on this one, I just want them to see that there's very specific things that have to be identified and visual for a reader reading their assessment on an FRQ. And this helps them to see what a grader would be looking at. And they get to grade it themselves. Again, it's very formative, and the kids really enjoy that part. The fact that they're not getting graded on how poorly or they did or how good they did. It's just the fact is they get to assess themselves and learn it before I actually assess them. Here's where we got an example where we've put all the information has been put in, and again, it identifies specific pieces that you can see, clear visual. And you can just show this to the students as well and show them specific things that we can see we're all not doing well in and what part we can improve on. Marguerite, have you used this part yet?
Yes, this is what I was actually talking about previously, looking at this kind of matrix view, the at a glance view here, where you could just kind of pick out kind of what concept the students are missing out on. So, for example, in this case, it's the first two columns there. It seems like the students missed that the most. And so it could be something that I can go back and address, like why are my students not understanding these two concepts? So maybe it was some of my questions that come up are how can I get my students to close this gap? Do I need to maybe spend a day reteaching this? Or the nice thing is that you at least get some specifics about what you need to reteach, which I think is great for us. We don't have to go back and reteach the entire unit. So I think that's just beneficial for every teacher. Maybe get again the students that scored the same, like the 4 students that are in red there, maybe get them together into a small group tutoring session on the specific concepts that they're maybe misunderstanding. That's just some of the ways that I've used it. I don't know what other ways you've used it, Andy.
This part I use these on the building blocks, and the resource afterwards is what we're going to get to next is the resources. What can you do afterwards? And that's the part that typically we don't do. We look at the results, okay, great, and we move on. Resource part, and I'm going to go ahead and move to the next part here, which is actually what we're talking about here, is the strategies afterwards. When you open up the assessment component and you're looking at the student scores, there's a resource link. When you get to that link, it gives you a series of different options for students to look at. They can see the same view. They can click on the videos as individuals, or you can do stuff in groups. For example, like in the building blocks, they have the student progress sheets, and they have a checklist of things, and they can say, well, why did I get this wrong? What was my misconceptions? And students allow themselves to actually walk through and relearn the component themselves. When it's a large group thing, again, we pretty much stop and say, ooh, wait a minute. We're not answering that specific question. We're actually going too far with our answers. That happens to my students in one particular question recently. So, but I wasn't anticipating it. So this component here allows either individual students to work through it, or you can work it in groups, or you can work it as a whole. I like to use those progress sheets, which is not the progress sheets, the next step sheets that students use, where they can actually fill out and the proper steps that we're supposed to do for the problem, or to identify the key word in the problem they didn't recognize. And they get to kind of work through what their issues were. And I assume that's the same thing, Marguerite, you do?
Yes, well, something similar. Well, something that I would have everybody think about is just how could you use that entire matrix or that at a glance to kind of help these strategies for improvement. Since AP Insight is pretty flexible, you can do several different things. One of the things that I do specifically is that there's actually a printout of a building block next steps guide, where it's more like a reflection page. And you get to put in there the question number, whether they got it correct or not, and a little blurb on the reflection. And so sometimes what I've done, and this is more specific to the building block quizzes, I've kind of gone over the 5 problems together and then have them fill out the reflection as they have their little Chromebooks open to get their own immediate feedback for whatever building block quiz we're working on. So that's just something to have you guys think about, how you guys can use this as a time for reflection, because what we want to enhance here is kind of the improvement of learning through this learning cycle. It's the formative assessment. So I don't know if that's something that's useful for you guys.
Yeah, very similarly, my students actually will click on the questions they got wrong, or they guessed and got right, and they'll click on it and they'll look at either the video, or they'll read through the content that explains what they should have done. If that doesn't work so well, they collaborate with some other students. They talk to each other and say, well, I don't still get it. And then the follow through would be when I get around to them, I ask them, they'll specifically ask me, I still don't get it, went through all these particular things. And they do fill out those sheets. Now, those kids are always looking for grades. Why am I not getting graded for this? They don't get graded right or wrong. They get graded on the reflection. I allow them to have some points for just showing their reflection. And the kids, obviously, I'm happy to do that because they've learned so much through this process.
I do something similar where, well, I take their building block quizzes as grades in class, and so if they score something that's terrible, I have them go through the reflection part, and then I give them kind of a remediated grade for it. So it's kind of, and it's kind of it's very self-guided. So it depends on kind of where they stand. If it's just one student, I can just print out their own reflection sheet or building blocks next step guide on their own. Or if it's something where I see a group of kids, I can give it to the group and they can work on it together. So it's very flexible in that sense. You can make it your own. So I challenge you guys to kind of think about different ways to doing this. And if you have any great ideas, you guys could always post them in our forum. Or if you have any questions, we can always post them in the forum as well. And I'll be happy to answer any of your questions for you.
Right, and that if you have a few questions you'd like to put down here, we can respond to them as Tiffany closes up for us. You can put down any questions you have. How can you see yourself using these resources, particularly the CA assessment? And Tiffany?
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, that's really helpful for you guys to like unpack your own experiences and give some context to what other teachers might experience when they get to that point. give a heads up in terms of what to anticipate. I'm just going to check over here in the chat box. We have some responses. A question from David. Can students access their personalized feedback on the site, or do you have to print it out for them? Oh, Margarita's so on top of things. There you go. She says yes, they can access their personalized feedback. So that's definitely an enormous advantage, right?
Right. When they actually get done and completed, they actually can click on each one with particular questions, and it gives them all this resource information. And it's really nice. They really enjoy that part because if they get that immediate feedback, they also get immediate response on how to fix what their misconception was.
Yeah, absolutely. They do really fast, and they quickly start looking. Oh, I missed it because I forgot that, or oh, little things like that. So definitely, it's really useful. I really love the feedback that they get back.
That's great. Yeah. So I really encourage you guys to sort of explore the site a little bit. I know it might seem overwhelming at first, but of course the best way to sort of like get to know what's there is to just root around and like see what's available. And then don't try not to overwhelm yourself with thinking like, okay, I have to like do all these things like in sequence or for an entire unit. Remember, this is like a flexible set of resources that you can use in ways that you think are going to help your students. So maybe it's just a matter of like trying one quiz for an upcoming unit and seeing how that goes with your students, like trying the feedback process with them and seeing how they respond to those next steps, to just sort of get their feet wet. And of course, we're I can't even believe I'm saying this, that it's January already, but like we're closing in on the time where like the course is gonna like be cycling out basically. There's gonna be a period coming up where you're reviewing for the AP exam and then the students are getting ready to take it. So maybe get your wheels turning in terms of like, okay, so during that period when I would be sort of revisiting some of these concepts, like how could these resources be used at that point in the year for me to sort of like have that last chance intervention with them, like, okay, before you go take that exam, we really need to clear some things up for you guys. Like these are foundational things that you need to know before you go in. So like maybe these resources can help you if you feel like you're going to be scrambling until then. Maybe that's a point where you can sort of dip your toe in the water, and then explore it more over the summer, right, and see what else is there that you can incorporate into your class next year. Like there's lots of ways to engage with the resources. So I just want to sort of give you guys permission to like think about it in really flexible ways, so that it's not an overwhelming process, but something that you actually find meaningful and useful for your students. Yeah, so we're closing in on 8 o'clock, and we're just going to wrap up with a couple of reminders. There is a section that I mentioned earlier that is under the discussions tab of the AP Insight homepage. It's called Share What Works. It's essentially an online discussion forum, an online community where you can share best practices and connect with other AP Insight calculus teachers. There are lots and lots of you guys. So feel free to like engage on there. As I said, Margarita is the moderator for that. So you can always post a question on there, and she's really responsive to those things and can help connect you. Yes, she could definitely connect you with someone. If she can't answer your question, she can connect you with someone who can. And then finally, we said that if you have questions, there is an email that you can go to apinsight@collegeboard.org. And finally, we do have a survey that I'm posting the link for right now. Oh, I lied. 1 second, I just need to copy and paste it. And then if you guys could just complete that survey real quick for us, I think it'll take you about 2 minutes. I've just posted it down here in the web links, and I'll also put it right here in the chat box. So you can click on it, give us some feedback about how this webinar was for you. We appreciate your patience at the very beginning with the technical difficulties, but you guys were amazing, and that is a chance in the survey. There's a chance in the survey for you to tell us what other topics you'd like to see in future webinars, whether it's live or a recorded session. So we'd really love to hear from you if you have thoughts about like, yeah, I'd love to know more about this, or something I've always been curious about, or I have no idea how to do this other thing. So feel free to leave your comments there. and we'll use that to plan out our next session. So thanks again for joining us, and thank you to Andy and Margarita for helping us facilitate tonight, and we hope you guys have a good evening. Thanks for joining.